833-7425. Hello to those of you down in Vidalia. Welcome, WVOP. We'll be bringing on a number of stations here in the next few weeks, and excuse me, they are first out of the gate. So welcome to those of you down in southeast Georgia. This show comes to you from Macon, Georgia, now slipping across the state of Georgia as well. News on that front here later. All right, I want to begin. This is the last full day of the Trump administration. Tomorrow at noon, Joe Biden will become president of the United States. You should know this may be my favorite conspiracy theory of all time from the Q corner. Apparently tomorrow at noon, when you see Joe Biden taking the oath of office, it'll actually be Donald Trump in disguise. He will look like Joe Biden. The reason you haven't seen Donald Trump in public is he's been losing weight to match Joe Biden's figure. He will be wearing a CGI plastic mask tomorrow to make him look like, I kid you not, this is the latest conspiracy theory, that if Biden stutters and stammers, is actually Donald Trump not yet used to doing Joe Biden's voice. It's next thing you know, it'll be Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. We'll have Face Off. Ay, goodness gracious. Hopefully no one is believing this. Who knows, in the dark recesses of the internet, some people may. But I, out of the gate, want to actually talk reflectively about the Trump administration and the final full day of where we are with the Trump administration. I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on the good that came from the Trump administration because, you know, the media hates the president. A lot of Americans dislike the president. The media despises the president. I'm kind of perturbed seeing people I've always thought were reasonable, fair-minded journalists have just gone off the deep end at the end of this. The level of gloating from members of the press over the president leaving because they didn't like him, I think is a little bit tragic and further erodes trust in the institution of the media at a time that we frankly could use some trust in these institutions, in large part because of the conspiracy brigade. It's easy to foster the conspiracy theories when nobody wants to watch CNN or NBC or ABC or CBS, and increasingly they don't want to watch Fox News if they're the president's supporters. So they go off to OAN, which is a propaganda network. They go off to Newsmax. That they go off to the dark recesses of the internet, and they find the conspiracy theorists. And that's unfortunate. And it also distracts from the good we got from the Trump administration. I'll begin with the obvious, because it actually is big. Very many people dismiss the idea of Bud Gorsuch, of the Trump-appointed justices to the United States Supreme Court, but it actually is a big deal. Aren't you glad that the Republicans did not wait until after the election to try to get Amy Coney Barrett through the Supreme Court? Aren't you glad? You should be glad. She is there. Neil Gorsuch is there. Brett Kavanaugh is there. And so the Supreme Court has a lock center-right coalition. Ruth Bader Ginsburg never took one for the team and stepped down early. She died at the Supreme Court. It allowed Donald Trump to fill her seat. Expect Justice Breyer to be gone after the court tenure. I suspect this summer Justice Breyer will flee so that Joe Biden can secure a lock on his seat with a Democrat-controlled Senate handling the confirmation process. But we do have three justices, but we not only have three justices, we have a number of courts that have shifted to the right. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, long been the scandalous court, the United States Supreme Court, routinely overruling the Ninth Circuit, has moved to the right, although it's not conservative now. But the 11th Circuit, the 5th Circuit, the 7th Circuit, I think, and the 2nd, I think, all have shifted to the right. The president filled up the circuits, the federal circuit courts. In fact, they even were able to replace Amy Coney Barrett on the circuit she was on out of Indiana. So yes, it does matter. For the last 4 years, we've seen progressives run into court and grab hold of left-wing judges to issue nationwide injunctions on this president. We will see conservatives do the same with the Biden administration. The courts will be a restraint on the Biden administration. When they come for your guns, having a conservative Supreme Court will matter. But that's not all. It is easy to say tax cuts, and the Biden administration wants to get rid of the tax cuts. But it's worth remembering that when the president cut taxes and Nancy Pelosi said $1,200 was chump change, she wanted to give people $1,400 in the stimulus package. $1,200. A lot of individuals got $1,000 to $1,500 from their employers when the president cut taxes. It wasn't just a tax cut on the income tax. What it was a massive repackaging of the corporate and small company tax structure in this country. The American corporate tax rate was the most anti-competitive in the world. Many American businesses were hoarding capital offshore. Apple, for example, had billions of dollars they were leaving in bank accounts offshore because under the American tax code, if they repatriated it, to use the lingo, if they repatriated that money into the United States, Apple would have had a massive tax burden. So Apple kept its money offshore. When the president and the Congress decided to cut the tax rates, Apple was able to bring a lot of that money back to the United States. It created jobs. It created shareholder capital. It created an opportunity for investment in the United States. But it wasn't just Apple. There were a number of banks. What is it, First, Fifth Bank or whatever, started the trend of banks giving their employees more take-home pay, or at least a big bonus because of the tax cut. A lot of major corporations did it. At the time, Democrats routinely dismissed it, but it wasn't just the Democrats. It was members of the media it dismissed as, well, oh, that's all they're giving to their employees? Look at all the money they're giving to their shareholders. That's bad. No, actually, it was very good, and it mattered to individuals. They got an extra $1,000 they were not expecting to get. It was amazing watching the media and the Democrats working hand in glove. Of course, you can say they're one entity, trying to dismiss the amount of money people got because of those tax cuts. Tax cuts, by the way, Joe Biden says he wants to get rid of, but when in fact he doesn't want to get rid of all the corporate tax cuts. Why? Because it put the United States in an economically competitive position. The ability of an LLC in this country to outperform, the ability of an LLC in this country to become competitive, the ability of an individual to form an LLC and save himself from taxes. Now, for those of you who don't know the lingo, an LLC is a limited liability company. It is like a corporation, but it's taxed like a partnership, meaning instead of having a corporate tax and then you pay an individual money and they get taxed again, the money flows through to your bottom line directly and you only get taxed one time. It is a big economic savings to individuals who form companies like that. I, for example, for my radio product and my daily newsletter, have an LLC. And I don't have to pay taxes on all this stuff as an individual. It flows through the company. I've got mine set up now so I can be taxed as a corporation and earn a salary. There are some nuances in the tax code. But by and large, cutting that tax rate to 20% from where it was mattered tremendously and helped a ton of American small businesses. It arguably helped us boost our economic output in this country so that when the virus did come crashing down around us, we were able to withstand it better than we otherwise would have. On foreign policy, this is the first president in years to not start a war. Barack Obama engaged us in Libya. He engaged us in Syria. He never wound down in Afghanistan and Iraq like he promised. George W. Bush, of course, did Iraq and Afghanistan. Bill Clinton did Serbia. George H.W. Bush did Iraq and Panama. Ronald Reagan arguably really didn't do a lot other than Grenada. But Donald Trump did not start any wars. He wound down Iraq and Afghanistan, not completely, but began the drawdown of troops. He did not start any wars. His foreign policy was arguably the most conservative that we've had in a while. He also moved our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And one of the things that this did was expose how many hacks there are in the media when so many people were screaming this was going to start a war, this will start a war. Now we've got peace in the Middle East. The president delivered either through his benign neglect or his pushing them to do it, threatening to withdraw from the Middle East, got Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Oman and Sudan and where else? What other countries? To establish peaceful relations. Israel and I think I said Iran. Israel and the UAE, Israel and Bahrain, Israel and Yemen, or not Yemen, Oman and Sudan and other countries began to have peaceful collaboration and coexistence in ways they had not in the past. Diplomatic recognition, embassies, trade, commerce, telecommunications, because this president was able to push it. He will not get a Nobel Prize for doing so, but he deserves one for it. And the amount of people who bellyached over, he really doesn't deserve the credit. Yes, actually, he does. Now, it could be he deserves the credit because he said, you know what, we're going to withdraw and we're not going to help you anymore, and that forced them to do it. But either way, he deserves the credit for them doing it, and he won't get that credit. It also exposed, as I mentioned, the rank opportunists and idiots within the media who were convinced that a war was going to start. Oh, my goodness, we're going to have a war, because of moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It exposed Senator John F. Kennedy, Kerry, John Kerry. It exposed him to be a hack when he said, we won't have a separate peace in the Middle East. Actually, you did. He also said it would start a war in the Middle East to move the embassy. It did not. The number of people who were convinced it would start a war to move the embassy to Jerusalem, and it did not. It brought peace in the Middle East. Funny how that works. He withdrew from the Paris Accord and the Iran deal. Withdrawing from the Iran deal exposed just how malicious Iran actually was, and also helped these Middle Eastern countries get along together. Domestically, the president deregulated at a meaningful level that has been often dismissed in the media. The president and his water efficiency standards will bring back dishwashers and washing machines and showers that actually meaningfully wash. He upped the restrictions on water regulation. So your dishwasher, which takes 2 hours now, could actually take an hour in the future and actually legitimately wash your dishes. Now, spare me the phone calls your dishwasher already works, or you scrub your dishes to begin with. I get these calls all the time. You clearly don't understand what I'm talking about. For most Americans, dishwashers that have been sold after 2009 in this country use a water efficiency standard that actually causes them to oftentimes run 2 to 3 hours and have your dishes not meaningfully cleaner than they are when they go into the dishwasher. The Trump administration boosted that. The Trump administration also forced the left to deal with federalism. Because of their disdain for the president and his restrictions of federal power, the left, to advance their agenda, was forced to deal with the states and work through states, which is what they're supposed to do. Listen, if California wants a universal health care program, we should all applaud California's willingness to do so, even if the rest of us don't want it. But California should be allowed to experiment within the bounds of federalism. We can oppose federal subsidy for them for doing it, but they should be allowed to experiment. And they have, because they know they can't get anywhere with Donald Trump. So federalism actually has been alive and well over the past 4 years. In education, the president and Betsy DeVos have been brilliant. They have cleared up due process issues when people in colleges and on campuses are charged with, for example, sexual assault in ways. They have these Orwellian trials. They're actually allowed now to actually have a good due process standard. So often people have been falsely accused on campuses, and they have a witch trial. No more. They have streamlined the student loan and education process and disbursements to states. They have restricted the spread of federal money outside of programs, Title I programs, where kids with special needs need the money. And prior administrations had expanded the pool of people who were able to get the money, thereby harming special needs kids. The president has also signed criminal justice reform, allowing a lot of people out of prison who really didn't need to stay in prison given the minor offenses they've done, particularly with marijuana and other minor charges, while he's also expanded use of the death penalty in this country to get rid of those who have been left on death row with taxpayer subsidy for some time. They've now been executed. Finally. This administration has done a lot of good. This administration has inarguably, frankly, done good. It has been overshadowed by their critics. It has been overshadowed by a press unwilling to acknowledge the good things this administration has done. It has been overshadowed oftentimes by even a Republican Party that has not wanted to say, you know what, this actually was a good thing. Maybe we should learn. So the question is, where does the Republican Party go post-Trump? Where do they go? What do they do? Will they go away populist and nationalist? Will they go away angry? What will they do? A couple of good people in the conservative movement have come up with some thoughtful pieces of what happens next With Donald Trump leaving the White House tomorrow morning, Joe Biden coming in tomorrow afternoon, where does the American conservative movement and the Republican Party go? We'll talk about it when we come back.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. You can call in and be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Alyssa Farah was the press secretary for Vice President Mike Pence for a while. She also served as press secretary for the Department of Defense and was a communications director for President Trump. She's penned a piece at Real Clear Politics. Where do conservatives go from here? Let me read you some of this. I, like millions of Americans of all political stripes, was horrified by what took place at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. I was equally horrified by the misinformation and false rhetoric that allowed it to happen in the first place. Make no mistake, the president's rhetoric directly contributed to the violence against our nation's greatest symbol of democracy. It must continually be denounced by Republicans and Democrats. But what about the last 4 years? What about the American First agenda that led to not only the most vibrant, but also the most inclusive economy in modern history? Under the Trump administration, we saw record low unemployment for virtually every group, including Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, women, and individuals with and without college degrees. These achievements were a direct result of the pro growth, America First agenda championed by the administration, along with Republicans in Congress. Prior to the pandemic, these policies brought about 7 million new jobs, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, 3% GDP growth, and record stock market gains. These historic achievements were a direct result of a deregulatory agenda, pro-growth tax policies, and prioritizing American investment. It was a conservative economic vision, and it wasn't a fluke. What about the foreign policy achievements of the Trump administration? These include rebuilding a depleted military, eradicating the ISIS caliphate, brokering historic Middle East peace agreements, restoring deterrence with Iran, holding China accountable, and getting NATO allies to contribute more to their collective defense. Republicans lost support among suburban women and college-educated white men and seniors, but on a policy basis, these constituencies shouldn't be hard for Republicans to get back. We are the party of safe communities, of health care choice for families, of school choice, of paid family leave, an effort championed by Ivanka Trump, and of economic mobility for all people. After the siege on the Capitol, there is an enormous effort among influential wings of the GOP to erase all that is Trump. That would be a terrible mistake. I would implore those who want to rebuild the party to not throw the good policy out with the bad rhetoric or bad leadership. At the same time, Republicans must come to grips with the fact that we've lost the moral high ground as a party. We've allowed our better angels to be replaced with convenient demons for electoral victories. We've allowed destructive moral equivocation on issues that should be easy to unequivocally denounce. We allowed the public to be misled into believing the Democratic election was stolen. Some even gave a subtle wink and a nod to dangerous conspiracy theories like those propagated by QAnon. We must regain the moral high ground. Any future Republican presidential candidate should be vetted as thoroughly for character and integrity as they are for their policy views. The party of Lincoln and Reagan must remember, the president should be the moral conscience of the country and embody the high character of our nation. We must take lessons from Trump, but restore the days of Reagan where character was king. And that's Alyssa Farah. She was a communications director for President Trump and the press secretary for Vice President Pence. A key nugget here. The economy. Until the virus, the economy was doing very well for people with and without college degrees, for black, Hispanic, white, women, men, everybody. The economy was inclusive under Donald Trump. Joe Biden wants to jack up the minimum wage to $15 an hour. They're going to try to do an all-encompassing budget reconciliation package with some of this stuff. That would actually put more people on the unemployment line as income goes up and companies have to lay people off in a time of pandemic. It would be a less inclusive economic recovery. Everybody's wages went up under Donald Trump. Everybody's did. All classes of people. What's coming from the Biden administration should give the Trump administration and its supporters from the outside the ability to remind people that, you did better when Donald Trump was president. Maybe return the Republicans and see that economic growth. They've got a message moving forward. But it's not just the economy. There are other things as well we need to focus on. Hello there, it is Erick Erickson across the nation now. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We got to get into some of the Georgia news, and we will in the next hour, but right now I want to continue on this thread of what happens next. Well, let me pause for a moment because I know some of you have relatives who are getting this stuff. It is remarkable to me. In fact, my sister yesterday texted me and said that her elderly neighbor across the street came over to check on them and said they need to make sure they've got food for the next 2 weeks and they've got their money out of the bank because this coming Friday, the whole system is going to be shut down. Grocery stores, the supply chain, everything is coming to an end as the military takes action to keep Donald Trump in place. So they're friends with someone who's friends with someone who's friends with Donald Trump Jr., and it came from them. It didn't. But let me explain to you, let me read you. This is an email that is circulating among some Trump supporters. It is derived from QAnon conspiracies. It has been picked up by some evangelical charismatic networks on the internet and spread around to people who are then spreading it. Some of it came from my church. Well, let me read this to you. This is cray-cray town, but here we go. Trump was not running for just another 4-year election in 2016. Trump was approached by the military to run, and his entire win has been and still is a military operation. Trump's first 4 years was to drain the lower swamp first. The swamp is deep and incorporated every industry in the world, banking, movie, pharmaceutical, food, you name it. They controlled it. Much has been handled. Barack Obama, leaving office, signed an executive order to pardon anyone prior of any crimes in the government. This was why no one was held accountable when Trump took office. The swamp rats could not be tried for those crimes, like the email scandal, the Clinton Foundation, the FISA spying. Only crimes after Obama left office could be tried. Therefore, new crimes had to be snared. The military needed to catch them in the act committing crimes with proof. President Trump said in his speech January 7, 2021, there will be a smooth, orderly transition of power. This in no way means that President Trump is transitioning power from his first term to Joe Biden. Did you hear him say Joe Biden? We are transitioning from the defunct USA Corporation to the Republic. President Trump will not technically get a second term, as he tweeted, won't be at Inauguration Day in January. That's because there won't be an Inauguration Day. This was the last recorded term of a president who served in the American corporation. President Trump dismantled the Banking Act of 1781 from England. The United States is going back to being a republic, and Donald J. Trump will be the first president of the new republic with the Constitution fully intact. The start date of the new republic is March 4th, 2021. The original start date of the new president until FDR changed it. At the end of President Trump's speech, he said, our incredible journey is only now beginning. Boom. No matter what it looks like, it's all optics. Military operations have thought of everything. Trump won an overwhelming victory and will be president of the new republic. This sounds so Star Wars, doesn't it? It's LaRouche QAnon mix. It's cray-cray. The swamp rats needed to commit their crime during the last 4 years, and they've been snared. Certifying a knowingly fraudulent election, as Pence in Congress did, was treason. Now President Trump is still president of the United States until January 2021. He has the power to invoke the Insurrection Act. The Insurrection Act deals with treason at a military level. Why did the president not invoke the Insurrection Act before? Because it involves the military, and people would have accused him of being a dictator. He's given everyone ample opportunity to come clean with the fraudulent election. The Supreme Court, the DOJ, the courts, Congress, the vice president, they all picked their lane for the most part and chose to certify a knowingly fraudulent election. Many Trump supporters have been pressured and threatened by the deep state. They always have. People appearing to go against Trump have either been threatened or they're part of the deep state. People have picked their lanes. Do not underestimate the president in the military operation. Trump often appears weak before he wins. Read The Art of the Deal. Twitter and Facebook are now banning, censoring the president. This gives the president the opportunity to use the emergency broadcast system in order to contact all Americans for what will need to they will need to hear regarding the next steps. Trump has said over and over, we have all the evidence. He's also said, we'll never surrender. He said, the best is yet to come. Do not watch or trust the mainstream media. They are the deep state. Do not give up. Keep the faith. Hashtag faith challenge. That's an actual email circulating to people. I've heard this from so many people asking, what is this? What's going on? Does it sound crazy to you? It should. If it doesn't, you may need a mental health check. None of this stuff is true. They are preying mostly on senior citizens with this stuff. A lot of the stuff is LaRouche conspiracy stuff. If you know who Lyndon LaRouche is, conspiracy theorists tied to him to a degree believe that the United States, the Treaty of Paris in 1789, it did not actually create the United States. It created a subservient state still run by King George in large part because of its lack of use of commas. Believe it or not, I said 1789, 1783. It is the lack of use of commas allowed conspiracy theorists to claim that we had never actually freed ourselves from Great Britain. That's right. Let me see if I can pull up the language. Where is it? So the way that they start the Treaty of Paris, that was the Treaty for Independence. It leaves out commas because it wasn't common at the time. So let me read you the beginning of the Treaty of Paris, just so you understand. It having pleased the divine providence to dispose the hearts of the most serene and most potent Prince George III, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, arch-treasurer and prince-elect of the Habsburg Roman Empire, etc., and of the United States of America. And what the LaRouche conspiracy theorists claim is that because there's no comma there, Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire, etc., and the United States of America, that this is, this is a treaty between him and the United States itself. And so there's a corporation, the American corporation, there's an incorporation of the District of Columbia. The language for incorporation of the District of Columbia says something about the incorporated territories. It's suggested that the United States is a really corporation. It's all misconstrued babbling by conspiracy theorists who try to make it work. They connect the strings and the dots, but it's crazy town. It is all crazy town. But this is now, because of the internet, by and large, people have been able to expand this and stretch it out. And expanding it and stretching it out, they've got more people coming up with plausible theories. But the bottom line is this. People want to believe. There are people who want to believe. And their want to believe trumps reality. The reality is, this is the last full day of the Trump administration. There are still people, and a lot of them are in charismatic faith communities, where they've allegedly received the voice of God that Trump is going to stay president. He's not. He's going away. And the people who argue otherwise are deluding themselves and deluding others. It is not true. But the crazy conspiracy theorists out there that they want to believe, that they genuinely want to believe. But what comes next with the president and his voters? Michael Brandon-Darty at National Review actually has an interesting piece. Let me read you some of this. Will Trumpism survive President Donald Trump? This again, nationalreview.com, Michael Brandon-Darty. For many observers, the answer to the question of will Trumpism survive President Donald Trump is obvious no. Trumpism is about Donald Trump and only Donald Trump, and it has no substance beyond that. It is a rhetoric and an effect in service to him, and that's on his best days. On most others, it is a gibbering cult and series of Baroque conspiracy theories Trumpism is just a giant sucking sound around the black hole of the man's own vanity. It will eventually disappear as he has up his own backside. This is, I think, incorrect. Trumpism is a populist nationalist politics. It is populist because it preaches political doctrines largely rejected by the incumbent political class: an America First foreign policy, revision of the aims of our trade policy, a halt to mass migration. It is a nationalist project whose ultimate aim is to restore the democratic link between the citizenry and the government, a link that has been threatened by a class of experts who govern a subordinate native class on behalf of oligarchic interests. Trumpism seeks a political mandate from the losers of the post-Cold War globalization. It chafes at the restraint of a world order when it does not suit the national interest. It is the restorationist character of this nationalist project that makes it appealing to many conservatives and ultimately an ally of conservatism, even if an occasionally annoying or obstreperous one. 5 years ago, I predicted that Trump would probably damage, perhaps irretrievably, the populist and nationalist cause he championed in the GOP, and he has roughly followed the script I laid out. His inconstancy and self-interest have often led him to betray or leave incomplete the populist and nationalist policies he championed. We haven't moved to the skills-based immigration system he promised. We haven't fully withdrawn from long wars where there's no reasonable hope of a satisfying conclusion or a national objective to be achieved. His trade war with China concluded without any fundamental changes to the economic and political dynamics of the Sino-American relation. In recent weeks, his behavior has brought further disrepute, and on it goes. And yet, he says, it's not over. To understand whether Trumpism has a future in the Republican Party, it's important to consider Trumpism before Trump. It has been tempting to view Trumpism as a minor and electorally inert heresy. It has never had any real champions in the Senate. The great phalanx of conservative institutions, think tanks, party leaders, media outlets were against Trumpism. It is, the critics say, Pat Buchananism, and revived only because Donald Trump was a celebrity. This is not true. While Trump's celebrity is an underrated factor in his success, looking backwards from 2021, Trumpism seems inevitably on the rise, with many antecedent figures across the party championing parts of it. Ronald Reagan used tariffs to defend Harley-Davidson. Pat Buchanan and his allied paleo-conservatives denounced the first Iraq War and attacked George H.W. Bush on the cultural issues, including the Civil Rights Act of 1991. Before the ideological transformation of the wake of 9/11, George W. Bush ran in 2000 a more constrained foreign policy. He preached the modesty of true strength and the humility of real greatness. His national security advisor, Condoleezza Rice, tilted against an American foreign policy that aimed at second-order effects, such as the advancement of human rights. He used tariffs in an attempt to hold Ohio and add Pennsylvania to the Republican coalition. Arguably, the last two contenders in the 2012 Republican primary were Trumpists of a sort. Rick Santorum was critical of free trade. Mitt Romney showed something of a Trumpist ability to get to Rick Perry's right on immigration, while being more supportive of the welfare state. If Romney had been elected, we might now have a more Trumpist trade arrangement with China than even Donald Trump had sought. The political logic of Trumpism resides in ideological and electoral opportunities, namely solidifying the GOP among its more evangelical voters and reaching out over and over again to the remnant of Reagan Democrats and other groups that have been globalization's losers, voters who have been effectively abandoned by a Democratic Party dominated by college-educated lifestyle progressives. In fact, one big clue that Trumpism won't just go away with Trump is that the phenomenon is global. We're seeing it all over the world. In fact, let me jump from what Michael Brandon Doherty wrote to what I wrote in 2015. I wrote a piece as Donald Trump was announcing his campaign on why Trump matters. Ironically, I got a note from him. So he had somebody print out the piece, wrote me a thank you note, said he disagreed with me. I said I didn't think he could win. He disagreed, said he would. Donald Trump was notorious for doing this. He would print out what he wanted to read. He wouldn't read it on the internet. He would write on it in Sharpie marker and then have his assistant fax it to everyone. And I got several of these. Let me read you a key paragraph of what I wrote in 2015. There is also a reality about Donald Trump's candidacy that you should also not underestimate. People hate Washington. They hate politicians. They are perfectly happy to champion a candidate who tells politicians to go to hell and provides creative directions on the path there. Donald Trump's candidacy does not exist in a nation where people think the politicians actually care about making the country great again. It only exists in a nation of cynics who think the powers that be want to manage decline and profit from it. That hasn't changed. I still, when I hear these people in the post-Trump world talk on TV, it sounds like a group of people who are kind of wink, yeah, we know we're not really the greatest country. China's on the rise. We got to manage our decline. The American experiment right now is controlled by a governing elite who have given up on the American dream. They believe it to be racist. They believe it to be bad. They believe it to be jingoistic, which they believe is bad. They think America first sounds too patriarchal, too racist, too xenophobic. And they drip with disdain for Americans who really, truly believe that the United States is the last best hope for mankind. I can't tell you the number of people I've heard in the last couple of years who are conservatives who say, yeah, every country says that. It's what we're supposed to say. No, I genuinely believe that this country is the last best hope for mankind. I genuinely believe this country has a mission in the world to be a beacon of liberty. I genuinely believe that. And I'm stunned by the number of people who tell me, yeah, but you don't really mean it, do you? No, I really believe it. And Donald Trump really believed it. And to the extent that the people who believe it aren't going away, Trumpism doesn't go away. What is it in the future? We're going to have to refine it. We're going to have to see. But there's something to be said for an American policy that puts America first and recognizes we've got a special place on the planet. And to the extent the Washington elite don't understand that, you will see another uprising and a second coming of something resembling Donald Trump, although perhaps more able to pull off what Donald Trump wanted to do.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric has a website too. Visit
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. Can we spend just a moment on something? beyond politics. This is primarily worth it because I have on my staff an individual who, for reasons no one can fathom, including himself, is a fan of the University of Tennessee football program. And on a holiday, when there was nothing else to do, and people wanted something other than politics and Trump leaving to talk about, they decided to get rid of Pruitt, their head coach. This is the University of Tennessee announced significant personnel action in the football program resulting from an investigation into potential NCAA violations. In addition to the findings, the chancellor said she's accepting the recommendations of athletic director Philip Fulmer to move forward with terminating head football coach Jeremy Pruitt, 2 assistant coaches, and 7 others. Plowman announced she's accepting Fulmer's recommendations, that she immediately begin a search for a new athletic director who will in turn hire the next football coach. Fulmer had come out of retirement in 2017 to accept the position on a short-term basis. He plans to retire from athletics as soon as his replacement is installed. We're deeply disappointed in the activities that led to the action taken today against Coach Pruitt. We are proud of the great history and tradition of our football program, and we will restore integrity and win at a championship level. Lies! All lies! They're proud of the history and traditions of the football program. The university's general counsel launched an internal inquiry in November after the university received a report from a credible source about possible NCAA violations within the football program. Based on the inquiry and potential allegations, the university engaged an outside law firm with NCAA compliance experience to conduct an investigation. The information provided in a briefing by counsel Friday afternoon indicates serious violations of NCAA rules occurred. The information also made clear that Coach Pruitt did not meet the university's expectations for promoting an atmosphere of compliance and monitoring. I got a question. I have a question. So, by the way, so they released termination letters to assistant football coaches Brian Niedermeyer, Shelton Felton. Shelton Felton, that's like Erick Erickson, isn't it? 4 members of the on-campus football recruiting staff, the director and assistant director of football player personnel, a football analyst, quality control. I have a question. I may need Philip for this one. Tennessee football apparently was violating all sorts of NCAA rules and still couldn't win? What rules were they violating? That they were violating these rules and they still couldn't win a football game. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, what was it? Georgia State beat them? This is, I don't know. How do you violate this many rules in the NCAA and still suck at football? I mean, you could have at least violated rules and recruited a good team, maybe. But, well, they waited. And this is the most bizarre thing. As a PR matter, you dump these stories on a Friday afternoon of a busy week, not on a Monday holiday where that's all we have to talk about. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the state of Georgia and beyond now. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me. Feel free to call in. In particular, if any of you, I normally am resistant to doing this, but today is the last full day of the Trump administration. If you got something you want to commend the president for doing or regret he didn't do, I would be interested in that. I got my own thoughts on this, and I want to spend a couple of moments talking about some of this, but first you need to know, we now know the Georgia results are certified, and tomorrow Joe Biden at noon becomes president of the United States, and by 3 o'clock, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are going to be sworn in to the United States Senate. The governor of California, I forget the guy's name, but the governor of California has confirmed his replacement for Kamala Harris. She resigned yesterday. And so all three of them will be sworn in tomorrow afternoon by Kamala Harris, who will become vice president of the United States at noon tomorrow. And the Democrats will control the Senate. There will be a power-sharing arrangement between Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer because there will technically be 50 of each without Harris there to break ties. The general parameters will be, in fact, let me hit this button here. Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell are hammering out their power-sharing agreement. It'll be a 50-50 Senate tomorrow at 3 p.m., when Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff are sworn in and Kamala Harris's replacement is sworn in from California. I forget the guy's name. Gavin Newsom has appointed him. Kamala Harris officially now out of the Senate. That power-sharing arrangement, from what we are led to believe thus far, it has not been finalized. Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer are supposed to meet today to finalize it, but it will put an equal number of Republicans and Democrats on committees. Democrats will become chairmen of the committees and will control the schedule. If there is a tie vote, it will automatically go to the floor of the Senate where it will be voted on. But this is very similar to the arrangement that the Republicans and Democrats had after 2000 when there was a tied Senate, before Jim Jeffords switched to the Democratic Party. So you'll see a 50-50 Senate with Chuck Schumer as majority leader, Mitch McConnell as minority leader. Chuck Schumer will set the flow of legislation that comes to the floor. The committees will be tied, an equal vote, but any tied vote from the committees, that legislation will come to the floor. Republicans and Democrats will be given largely equal time to debate on the floor, even though the schedule and agenda will be set by the Democrats. The filibuster will remain in place because the Democrats do not have enough votes to break the filibuster. Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, Dianne Feinstein have all come out and said no, they're not in favor of getting rid of the filibuster, so that will remain. They will hammer out an agreement as well today, McConnell and Schumer will, on how to handle President Trump's impeachment. The rules and precedents of the Senate suggest there must be a trial. The Democrats actually, behind the scenes, I was joking about this the other day somewhat flippantly, wondering if the Democrats would want to go through with it if they decided that letting Donald Trump have the potential to be president again in 4 years would do more damage to the Republicans than impeaching him and convicting him. They would need 17 Republicans. They probably got 7 votes for conviction, so they need 10 more Republicans. Would Mitch McConnell give them that? McConnell is said behind the scenes to be ready to help get enough votes to convict the president and end his ability to run again in 4 years. But it's all speculation. We don't really know. We don't really understand how that process would work because there's never been a trial of a president of the United States who has left office. Is it constitutional? There are some people on the right arguing, no, it's not. What's interesting is a couple of these people in the past authored papers on the topic and said, yes, it was. But now that they're supporting the president, they've gone, oh, no, you can't do this. Well, we'll go with before there was Trump when they were saying it would. In fact, there is precedent in the Senate that you can impeach someone who has left office. They've done it before, just not to the president. The question is whether or not the Chief Justice of the United States will preside, and my presumption is he will not, because the Chief Justice only presides if the president is the current president, because the vice president would have a conflict of interest. Kamala Harris will have no conflict of interest here. We'll see how they proceed moving forward. They could arguably say that, given the situation, that they can't convict, they can't have a trial because the president is gone and disrupt prior precedent. The prior precedent applied to federal judges, I think one cabinet secretary, but never to the elected president. So they've got some wiggle room there. I still wonder if the Democrats will say it would be worse for the GOP not to do it, because they'll have to spend 4 years deciding, is he going to run again? Can I run? Is he going to run? How much deference do I show to him if I want to run and he wants to run? And that could discombobulate the GOP. We'll see. We'll see. But what we do know is that the Democrats will take control of the Senate tomorrow afternoon. They will control the flow of the agenda, but they will have an equal number of seats on committees between Republicans and Democrats. I want to get into some Georgia news, but before I do, I've got a few thoughts on where we're headed in a couple of problematic ways. I don't know if you've heard Katie Couric, formerly of NBC News, saying that Trump supporters are going to have to be deprogrammed. You've got Steve Cohen, the Democratic congressman, casting doubts on the National Guard, that they may be an inside threat to Joe Biden because they're in the military, and so they probably they probably voted for Donald Trump. Listen to Cohen.
The Guard is 90-some-odd%, I believe, male. Only about 20% of white males voted for Biden. You got to figure that in the Guard, which is predominantly more conservative, and I see that on my social media, and we know it, they're probably not more than 25% of the people that are there protecting us who voted for Biden. The other 75% are in the class that would be the large class of folks who might want to do something. And there were military people and police who took oaths to defend the Constitution and to protect and defend, who didn't do it, who were in the insurrection. So it does concern me.
So you got that because they're white members of the National Guard. They may be insurrectionists and want to do harm to Joe Biden merely because they're white members of the National Guard. Eli Mistel is a commentator on MSNBC. Listen to this.
I believe that the Constitution is a racist document. I believe that it was written at a time when the people were racist. It was written to support a white supremacist state. And it's structurally still that document. Now, it has been updated. I tend to think, and this is my view, not everybody agrees with me, not everybody on my side of the aisle agrees with me. I tend to think that the 14th Amendment, with its guarantee of equal protection and substantive due process for all, is enough that, if applied to the rest of the document, to save the Constitution from its original sins, to redeem the Constitution from the racism and bigotry and sexism of its founding.
The racism, bigotry, and sexism of its founding. This is where we're headed. You've got Steve Cohen, congressman, claiming that the National Guard is so white it could be an insurrectionist force. Here's Senator Ben Cardin as well on the FBI.
As we continue to understand just the scope of the threat that we face over the coming days and weeks, the acting defense secretary specifically said there is no known intelligence of an insider threat to the inauguration. But does the news that the FBI vetting the National Guard troops that are in Washington make you at all concerned about security and potential threats in the inauguration that you are saying will go off smoothly?
I think they're taking every conceivable precaution to make sure that January the 20th is a safe day for our country and for our democracy. So they're taking extra precautions. As you said, there's no specific risks of anyone in the National Guard being compromised, but it's the right thing to do. Safety has to be our first priority, and we're going to make sure that January 20th is a safe day in our nation's capital.
You got the FBI potentially vetting the National Guard. You've got Steve Cohen saying they're so white, they're probably insurrectionists. You've got Eli Mistel on CNN saying that or on MSNBC rather, saying the U.S. Constitution is a racist, bigoted, sexist document. This is where we're headed. The Democrats are going to overplay their hand on a lot of what has happened in the country. And I want to make a point here. In 2015, I mentioned in the last hour, I wrote in 2015 that Donald Trump's presidency did not exist in a country where the people thought that the political class was actually taking care of them as opposed to taking care of their own interests. And we hear this refrain over and over, and I think there's something to it. When you have a Republican Party and a Democratic Party elite that believes that Donald Trump's supporters are inherently bad, you've got a problem, because Donald Trump was able to transcend the normal coalitions of American politics and attract in black and Hispanic voters. And the Democrats, if you'll recall, during the campaign explained it away as the black men were coming because of toxic masculinity, and the Hispanics were coming because they had come from countries with strong men as leaders, even though they were fleeing them. And that's why it was a complete misunderstanding of the phenomenon that's going on. These people want jobs. They want work. And they recognize that Donald Trump had benefited them. The lowest unemployment for black and Hispanics in this country came under Donald Trump, not under Barack Obama. And as it is possible, I think, for some Trump supporters to misunderstand what has happened and go about building their future the wrong way, it is most likely that it will be the upper echelons of both parties in this country that so resented the last 4 years that they themselves will misinterpret what has happened. There was a saying about the Bourbon monarchs of France, that they learned nothing and forgot nothing. And that ultimately led to their demise at the guillotine. And I think we see this among American intellectual elite in the media and in political parties. They're not willing to learn why exactly did Donald Trump become the president. They have internalized that it was a bunch of racist bigots reacting to having a black president, which isn't true. And they're not willing to learn that there are a large group of people in this country who felt left behind by the successes of the country. And that is exacerbated by lockdowns that aren't doing any good, by shelter-in-place rules that aren't doing any good, by mismanagement of the virus at the state level, not the federal level, and by an American media that seems to want to bolster some of the more incompetent administrations in this country, like the Cuomo administration in New York, while attacking some of the more credible ones, like Brian Kemp here in Georgia or Ron DeSantis in Florida, or totally ignoring, for example, in West Virginia. West Virginia has had a better rollout of the vaccine than any other state in the nation, and the media totally ignoring it, and ignoring how incompetent it has been in Virginia, because they're not willing anymore to just tell facts. They've got to have narratives. And the narrative about Trump supporters is that they're bigoted racists. All of them believe conspiracy theories. All of them are terrible, and all of them are white, and white people need to apologize for their sin of whiteness because the sin of whiteness got to Donald Trump. And that thoroughly plays into the biases of an elite in this country, an academic elite, of a progressive elite in both parties, and totally ignores the actual reality. Believe it or not, there are people in this country across races, across ideological boundaries, who just want a job, who want to be the master and commander of their own destiny, who realize that Washington telling everyone how to live is not a good solution. And they get ignored. They get spat upon. They get called the racists. They get called the conspiracy theorists. They're lumped in with a bunch of bad people. And by the way, when they unite, they are a majority in the country. And they can still unite in the future. And I think what it'll take is someone selling a version of what Donald Trump sold, but doing so in a less combative way. Because we saw when Americans went to the polls in November, they rejected the combative nature of both the progressive Democrats and the president. The president lost, and the progressive Democrats who were burning down America lost because Americans were tired of the drama. You offer a Trump-style policy without the Trump-style drama, you get a winning coalition in the United States. That's a little more big government than I prefer, a little more pro-life than some prefer, a little more conservative socially, and a little more liberal fiscally. And by the way, that's where the bulk of Americans are. People always want to say, let's have a fiscally conservative, socially liberal party. There's no demand for that in this country. What there is a real demand for in this country is a party that is more fiscally liberal than I prefer, but more socially conservative than the media elite prefer. And to the extent that someone recognizes that, a Josh Hawley, a Kristi Noem, a Nikki Haley, the Republican Party could come swiftly back to power very quickly.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Erick has a website too.
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. I need to tell you something, and this will, to some degree, benefit you. You know how, well, this is happening to me on a regular basis now. That I get now constantly spam text messages, and I'm not talking about the give me money stuff from the politicians. I get one, your UPS package is going to be delivered this morning. Click here, or the post office needs your signature. Click here, and you get these. You get them from restaurants all the time. We've got a local ice cream place in town that sometimes sends us. We take the kids there, and we'll get messages from them, 50% off or whatever, and you just an inordinate amount of text messages. So I use that service, and if you text the word data to 33777 or what have you, I received notice yesterday that the mobile phone carriers are getting rid of those 5 and 6 digit numbers from which you can text. So, for example, my ability to tell you to text the word data to 33777 for something is going away. So I'm going to use you this morning as my guinea pigs, because I actually have legitimate need. I want to be able to test this. The phone number to call the program is 877-973-7425. We're going to use that for the texting service. And so the way it works now with the phone companies is you have to have a phone number that is connected to a landline, because you've got a lot of phone numbers out there that aren't actually connected to landlines, and so they're going to ban that for tech services as well. So you've got to have a phone number that is tied to a landline for which you can use for texting. So anyone who's listening who wants to, give it a try for me so I can do real-time testing. Text the word data to 877-973-7425. That's 877-97-ERIC. The same number you call the show with. If it works, you'll get back a text from me that has a link to my daily newsletter that you can subscribe to if you want, and also to Robinhood. If you join up with Robinhood, they give me a share of stock and you a share of stock. It's a stock trading platform. You can do cryptocurrency and stuff. But give it a whirl, see if it works. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Use that as your texting number and text data. So now we got to redo. It's going away in April. In April, the phone companies are getting rid of it, and so you've got until April. I've got until April to update all my liners and stuff for the show, because we tell people this all the time. But more importantly, there's another one, and this is actually significant, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this, my broken record moment this morning. One of the words that I use, and we don't use it except this time of year, the legislature is meeting. And what I would very much like for you to do is text the word Army, A-R-M-Y. Text the word Army to 877-973-7425, 877-97-ERIC. Text the word Army, because we need to mobilize on the state legislature in Georgia over the Board of Pardon and Paroles. It's time for the state legislature to investigate the Board of Pardon and Paroles. Well, thank you very much to those of you who tested the number. It is definitely working. My goodness. You know, it kind of makes me feel good as well. The number of people who did it. Wow. We've got listeners. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, how do you know anybody listens to your show? Nobody ever calls in. It's like, well, because they like listening to me. I can tell I got listeners given the number of people who just use that text number. Thank you. That was a good test. It worked. I want to talk about the Georgia Republican Party for a moment. Georgia Republicans have some trouble, and that trouble is spilling out into what to do about Donald Trump and his supporters, and is emblematic, highlighted by Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Northwest Georgia. She was banned from Twitter for 12 hours. She is kind of, you know, Maxine Waters. She's the dummy Democrat who always says obnoxious things and has encouraged people to get in people's faces and show up at their houses and harass them and all that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is kind of the Republicans' Maxine Waters. She's kind of an embarrassment to the party, and everybody knows it, but she's got a hardcore constituency, and people don't want to say anything. But, I mean, she is. She's... And yesterday she went after Gabe Sterling from the Secretary of State's office, saying that he cost the GOP 2 seats. Actually, Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Republicans cost the GOP these seats. Her part of the state had the worst turnout of Republicans. And it came after 2 months of telling people that it was going to be stolen. The race was going to be stolen. There were signs all over North Georgia about don't vote in an election that's going to be stolen. If you went up 75 to Adairsville and got off there at the Cracker Barrel in Adairsville, like you're headed to Barnsley Gardens, there was a big sign when you got off the interstate that said they're going to steal it again. Don't vote. Republicans in the state internalized the stolen election nonsense and cost themselves 2 Senate seats, and will have to suffer with John Ossoff as the U.S. Senator for the next 6 years. God help us. 6 years of that guy. But what does the GOP do? We've got redistricting coming up, and they're going to have to deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who may want to run for governor or the Senate. There is already worry among Republicans about running against Warnock in 2 years. Republicans are fretting over who to put up. Will Marjorie Taylor Greene run? There is some mixed split conspiracy thinking here. Some Republicans I've talked to said they would like to redistrict Marjorie Taylor Greene out of Congress. They claim she's an embarrassment. She is. A conspiracy theorist. She is. And not fit to be in Congress. Well, I disagree with that because the voters put her there. So she's allowed to be there. So do they redistrict her out or not? And then there is a fear, if they redistrict her out, will that embolden her to try to primary challenge Brian Kemp or run for the U.S. Senate against Warnock? There is a concern there. It's the laws of unintended consequences that are keeping Republicans in Georgia up at night. My suspicion is that they're going... Look, all of the districts have to be tweaked. We're in a redistricting year. The census has been done. Georgia has to reshape some lines. The Republicans want to bolster themselves. They want to do what they can to stay in power. One of the things that the Republicans are thinking of doing is sacrificing some Republican votes to Lucy McBath's district, letting Lucy McBath stay to ensure the Republican districts stay strong, sacrifice Carolyn Bordeaux as the Democrat in the 7th Congressional District. That's the part, mostly Gwinnett County, parts of Hall County. Let me pull up the Georgia congressional districts so I can get the map up in front of me. Yeah, so the 7th Congressional District is Southern Forsyth County and Gwinnett County. There is some consideration of moving some of these districts around, the 11th and the 14th, for example. The 11th is Barry Loudermilk's district. Maybe connect Barry Loudermilk and Marjorie Taylor Greene into a common district that they've got to primary each other. That's a possibility. One of the possibilities is to move the 6th congressional district and stretch it fully encompassing Cobb and make it a Democratic district for sure. And then taking some of the 7th congressional district and moving, for example, some of Hank Johnson or Nikemia Williams or whatever that seat's going to be, the former John Lewis seat, move it around a little bit. There are all sorts of ways for them to do these sorts of things. My guess is what they do is they stretch the 4th congressional district up a little bit into Gwinnett County. And that locks in Hank Johnson there. And then take some of the 7th congressional district and move it more fully half of Gwinnett and all of Forsyth. And that makes a Republican district for someone like Rich McCormick to run again and pick off Carolyn Bordeaux. And then what do you do about Lucy McBath? Maybe cut it all of Cobb out or portions of Cobb and then stretch in some of Cherokee. That possibly could strengthen Lucy McBath, possibly weaken her, depending on where you draw. Then do you merge the 14th and the 11th to a degree so that Marjorie Taylor Greene and someone like a Barry Loudermilk would have to run together? Do you connect parts of Cobb and Paulding together so that you strengthen Barry Loudermilk against Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene has to run somewhere else? Do you do these sorts of things? The Republicans have her in their head as much as the Democrats when they're redistricting. You know, you've got to give Marjorie Taylor Greene credit. I'm not a fan, but you got to give her credit. You've got Republicans in Atlanta obsessing about what to do with her. Do they leave her alone and hope she stays in the House, or do they go on and do the inevitable, knowing eventually she's going to want to run for higher office? Might as well get rid of her now if they can. But then the Republicans have other problems. What do you do about Brian Kemp? Does Marjorie Taylor Greene run against him? Does someone pro-Trump run against him? What about Vernon Jones? Vernon Jones in the state House is now switching to the Republican Party. There are some who think he wants to run against Warnock. He could rally the Trump base, but then has enough baggage that perhaps he could not win a general election against Warnock. What do you do? How do you do this? The GOP in Georgia has to be careful with what they do. And they don't have a ton of options. But there's something the Republican Party has in Georgia that it can use to its advantage. The GOP here has a bench. The Democrats don't have a very big bench because they've been out of power. You know, in 2022, Stacey Abrams is going to run. You're going to have Stacey Abrams, you're going to have Raphael Warnock running. And you know, if you got Brian Kemp and Jeff Duncan running again, depending on who your senator is, the Democrats are going to make it a race issue. The Democrats are going to stir up racial sentiment in Georgia. They saw how high black turnout was, but you do have to understand that black turnout was as high as it was largely because white voters stayed home. Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's my prediction for the GOP in Georgia. You're going to have some tweaks to the election laws in the state. You're probably going to have a concerted Republican effort to push Brad Raffensperger out so he doesn't run for re-election. And then you're going to have the GOP say, we fixed the problems. The Democrats can't steal it now. You've got to come back. And they will hope like hell that the Republicans turn back out. Then you've got Brian Kemp is probably going to try to get the legislature to let him create some sort of super PAC. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain this to you. In Georgia, outside groups are restricted in how they can fund state races. It's different from federal races. You know, you have those outside groups come in. They ran ads on this program, and they could spend unlimited dollars. In Georgia, under Georgia law, they can't. So the governor, to an extent, has to rely on the Georgia Republican Party. But there is no trust right now between the elected leaders in the state and the Georgia Republican Party. There is a growing sentiment among a lot of our elected leaders that David Schaefer is trying to use his position as chairman to run for office again. They do, in large part, blame Schaefer for talking down the election and picking fights in the state as one of the reasons that they lost the Senate seats. So there's going to be a move to get the governor a super PAC created. where he can essentially argue that Stacey Abrams already has all these outside groups that are behaving in such a way, and he needs to be able to unify to be able to run, and they'll probably give it to him. I was opposed to it originally, but I kind of think at this point it's a necessary thing. But then, what do you do with everyone else? What do you do with Republican senators and state representatives, Republican state senators and representatives, at a time of redistricting where the Democratic vote is growing in the state? You're going to have to make some sacrifices. My guess is that the Senate is going to sacrifice Burt Jones and Brandon Beach. I like both of them. I think they're both good guys, but they ran on the election was stolen stuff. Brandon Beach and Burt Jones have already been punished in the state Senate for the Stop the Steal stuff. Then you've got the Speaker of the House who wants some of his nemesis gone. There were 10 Republicans in the state House who voted against David Ralston as Speaker of the House. Some of those will be sacrificed in redistricting. The simple fact of the matter is, if the GOP wants to shore up its strength in the state legislature, it's got to make sacrifices. It's got to sacrifice some of its own until they can figure out a way to get the suburbs back. But here's the thing, and this is a mistake that I think too many Republicans and others fall into too often. One of the things Republicans do is they decide it's over, it's done, demography is destiny, let's hold on as best we can and hope for a miracle. I think the Republican Party in Georgia and nationally needs to stop buying into that nonsense. The fact of the matter is, Republicans did see their gains in the Hispanic and black community, except in the runoff here in Georgia. But even then, when you look down in South Georgia, as I said would happen, a number of black farmers voted for David Perdue. Ossoff and Warnock were able to make up their gains, but it was actually in South Georgia, Ossoff did not do as well as Warnock because black pastors, in fact, and did not turn out the vote for Ossoff as much as black farmers did for David Perdue. Perdue got closer to Ossoff than Loeffler did to Warnock because of black farmers in South Georgia. There are gains to be made by the GOP demographically in the state. And I'm afraid that the Speaker of the House institutionally in the state seems to take the position that we should be more moderate, we should be more Democrat in some of what we want to do. There are some people who heard the governor when he said he wants to consider reforming the citizens arrest law, that, oh, he's going to go in that direction. Not really. At least definitely not compared to the way David Ralston wants to go. The Republicans in Georgia have an opportunity to show that conservatism works over the next 2 years and focus on jobs and the economy. Listen, the bottom line is most people, Republican and Democrat alike, will vote for the party that gives them jobs and improves the economy. And as the Biden administration advances policies like a $50 an hour minimum wage and other things that are going to start stifling the economy, Brian Kemp and the GOP in Georgia have the opportunity to benefit the Georgia economy and, more importantly, benefit local jobs. One of the biggest criticisms about Nathan Deal and Sonny Perdue is that they tried to bring to Georgia out-of-state Fortune 500 companies to create jobs here. And what actually happened is those companies came here for tax advantage, but then they brought people with them from out of state, and they fundamentally transformed the urban and suburban areas in Atlanta and made them more Democrat. Brian Kemp's approach, as really the first lifelong Republican elected as governor since Reconstruction, Brian Kemp's point and his thinking is, let's make Georgia businesses bigger and let's provide them opportunities to expand outside of Atlanta and create jobs and opportunity down in southeast Georgia, down in southwest Georgia. If they can, for the next couple of years, put their mind to that task and do that, they really don't have to worry about the rest of it. You get people jobs, you get people good jobs, and you get kids back in school. That's a path to re-election for the GOP in Georgia. It all comes down to the fundamentals. It comes down to the basics. There's no need to think about these five-dimensional chess rules. Do things that benefit people and benefit their pocketbook, and they will reward you at the ballot box, regardless of the letter next to your name. It's a basic political 101 understanding that the Republicans in Georgia need to remember.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Erick has a website.
The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC. That is 877-973-7425. You know, there's also the budget issue we got to deal with here in Georgia. It looks like we've got more money coming into the Treasury in the state after all those massive cuts. And the governor wants to spend a little more in schools, and he's gotten some criticism from the right on this, but I don't know how you can criticize him on this one, given that they cut a massive amount from the education budget as the pandemic slowed the economy, and now they're just putting it back. It's not like they're throwing money at the problem. They actually did some pretty big cuts, and now they're giving it back. They couldn't do the teacher pay raises the governor wanted to do. And he's going to have to, they're going to have to put that money back. It's not a bad thing. Now, let's go to the phones. Joel is calling. Joel, you're up first. Welcome.
How's it going, Eric? I really do appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks so much.
So I just want to briefly talk a little bit about my subset of the population in Georgia. I'm a South Indian, and most of the time I sort of get a lot of flack for not being a Democrat because it's sort of similar to how black voters usually are maligned if they don't vote Democrat. There is that certain part of culture, and yet South Indians are culturally conservative in their demeanor. It's just that whenever they vote, they always seem to vote Democrat. And I was curious, do you think the GOP should reach out to other smaller ethnicities that are not as reached out to?
Yeah, you know, as a matter of fact, so there was a data analysis done in the Carolyn Bordeaux-Rich McCormick district. This is why I hope Rich McCormick either runs for Congress again or runs for the Senate. So Asian voters in the Gwinnett County area shifted to the right, both in terms of voting for the Republicans in November and in the runoff. Indian subcontinent as a subset of Asian voters actually shifted further to the right than Southeast Asian voters as a whole. definitely in play for the GOP. And I mean, when you look at it, the nation has two Indian American governors, Bobby Jindal in Louisiana and Nikki Haley in South Carolina. They're both Republican. I think the field is ripe for the GOP to make that push. There's actually some fascinating data out there demographically that Southeast Asian voters and Korean American voters are moving to the right, and it is the Chinese-based American voters that are actually staying with the Democrats, and Japanese American voters tend to stay with the Democrats. And it's very much, I think that my working theory here, Joel, is that the Democrats very much did a situation with Hispanic voters where they viewed them as an identity group, as opposed to these are people who come from Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. They're not an identity group. And I think the Democrats run the risk of doing the same thing with Asian voters because, for example, Korean voters are overwhelmingly Presbyterian. Did you know that the largest Presbyterian churches in the world are in South Korea? Korean voters are overwhelmingly Christian. They're not actually Asian-oriented religions like Taoist, Shintoist, and the like. They're overwhelmingly Christian. Korean voters tend to vote Republican. In fact, the first two Korean-American women in Congress have been elected. They're both Republican. Taiwanese, Chinese, Japanese, they tend to vote Democrat. Vietnamese immigrants tend to vote Republican. And now we know Indian subcontinent voters tend to vote Republican, and at an increasing rate, they're voting Republican. You've got Nikki Haley and Bobby Jindal as proof of where the loyalties lie. And in large part, Indian American voters vote Republican because of business and economic issues, not because of cultural issues, which is interesting. Some Southeast Asian voters, particularly Indonesian voters, tend to vote to the right more and more these days on cultural issues, not economic issues. Korean voters tend to vote Republican based on cultural issues, not economic issues. It's a fascinating dynamic. And when we lump everyone together as an Asian voter, we're falling into the same trap that Democrats do with Hispanic or Latino voters, where, yes, okay. They all come from Latin American or they speak Spanish, but they have each of them has a national identity. And to the extent that the GOP reaches out to these voters, they've got to reach out to them not as an ethnic group, but as people who have real issues and people who have economic and cultural concerns in the country that are specific to them, not specific to an identity group. And I actually think that gives the GOP an advantage because the Democrats have been so consumed of late with identity politics, it makes it much harder for them to advance a narrative with groups of people who do not see themselves as part of an identity politics group. The phone number here is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. More of your calls when we come back. And also, we now have a better sense of what Joe Biden intends to do when he comes to office, a massive spending binge that even some Republicans want to help him with. And immigration, it's coming back. Okay. I've got the details when we come back here. and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show across the state of Georgia. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I want to actually start with a phone call because it's relevant to our last hour and where we're headed this hour. I want to go to Shane calling from Winder. Shane, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Hope you are too.
I am. What's going on?
I was just wondering if when the census data comes in, we pick up an extra congressional seat like a lot of people were projecting. How is that going to affect redistricting?
Well, as a matter of fact, I had assumed that we would, but we've got the data now from the census, and we're not going to gain an extra seat now, it looks like. And the reason we're not going to gain an extra seat is because Texas and Florida grew too much.
Okay.
Yeah, so many people, Shane, thought we were going to get one. I thought we were going to get an extra one, but because of so Texas and Florida and North Carolina have outpaced Georgia in population growth, and Alabama actually grew but didn't grow fast enough. So Alabama's going to lose a seat. Georgia will not gain a seat. Texas is going to get 3 seats. Florida is going to get 2 seats, and North Carolina is going to get 1 seat. Essentially taking any seats we should have, going to go to them instead.
All right. Well, I guess that fixes that.
Yeah, unfortunately, and it would be one more Republican in the state. And I assumed we were going to get one. But let me give you the data now. The Wall Street Journal actually had this out last week. I had to go back and find it. So Montana, Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, and North Carolina are going to get one, I said Senate seat, House seat in the House of Representatives. One more seat in the House. Montana, Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, and North Carolina. Florida is going to get 2 seats in the House. And Texas is going to get 3 seats in the House. California, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Rhode Island are all going to lose a seat. And then the data is still pending on if New York and Alabama are going to lose seats. It looks like New York and Alabama will each lose a seat. And ironically, Alabama may be able to hold on because it actually has had positive population growth. It just has grown slowly. The problem is we have a fixed number of seats in the House of Representatives now. And the population is based on, 750,000 people. And so they've got to be reapportioned around the country. The Census Bureau is the one that announces them. And there was some debate as to whether or not they would. But it does look like Alabama and New York could both lose one. Now, what does that do to the Electoral College? This is the interesting thing. The Electoral College is determined based on the total number of House seats plus 2 Senate seats. So, for example, Georgia has 14 congressional districts. So Georgia has 16 votes in the Electoral College, 14 in the House, 2 in the Senate. So North Carolina, it tends to be Republican, so that's going to go up. Montana tends to vote Republican for president, so that'll boost it. Texas is going to get boosted by 3 Electoral College votes. Florida by 2 Electoral College votes. It tends to be Republican. But then Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia have tended to be more Republican more often than not. Well, Pennsylvania arguably not, but Ohio and West Virginia, they're both going to lose one. But then Illinois, California, Minnesota, and New York and Michigan, they're all going to lose a seat, so that's going to hurt the Democrats. The Democrats will be helped by Colorado and Oregon, possibly Arizona. The Republicans will be helped by Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, possibly Arizona. But genuinely, given the way that it's matched across the nation, it's probably going to come out to be a wash between the 2 parties. But now let's think about this. Texas and Florida and Arizona and Montana and Georgia will all have Republican legislatures that will draw the lines. So Montana could essentially ensure that it has 2 Republican members of Congress. Texas could ensure that it gets 3 Republican members of Congress. Florida could get 2 more Republican members of Congress. North Carolina, another one. And Georgia could wipe out a Democratic member of Congress and boost its Republican congressman all through redistricting. Many of the states could. This is one of the downsides of the election for the Democrats, that this is why the Democrats, even though they won big in November, acted very much like they had lost everything, because they were hoping to pick up one of the houses of the Arizona legislature. They were hoping to pick up the Minnesota State Senate. They were hoping to hold on to New Hampshire. They lost the New Hampshire legislature entirely. They lost the Minnesota State Senate. They did not make ground in Texas or Arizona or Georgia or Florida or North Carolina like they intended. So North Carolina will have a Democratic governor who can veto maps, but otherwise, you've got the states where the biggest gains in Congress are coming from are all controlled by Republicans, and this is another reason that the Democrats are mad and still screaming about redistricting. So someone put me on an email list for the Democrats' redistricting team, and it's led by Eric Holder. He was fundraising with the Soroses of the world and the like to fund a group to fight at the state legislative level and pick up some state legislatures so that the Democrats could have a better shot at redistricting to keep the Democrats in control of Congress. And it didn't go well for him or this group. They kind of fractured and shattered, and they lost big in November. And the result is that the Republicans dominated at the state legislative level, and the Republicans dominated at the congressional level. I mean, my goodness. The Republicans did not lose a seat in the House of Representatives, and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats lost a number of them. That should tell them everything they need to know. It's allowed the conspiracy theorists to claim that the presidential race had to be stolen because the Republicans did so well everywhere else, when the result is actually that voters across the country just don't want any drama. That they actually like the president's policies. They didn't like the president. That's the easiest way to, instead of coming up with an elaborate conspiracy theory, the easiest and most honest way to interpret the election is that voters actually kind of liked what they got from the Trump administration. They just didn't like the president. So they bolstered Republicans in the state, in the House and in state legislatures. But then Republicans in Georgia internalized that the race had been stolen and handed the Democrats the Senate. But even the Democrats' handling of the Senate is 50-50. Now, the problem here is that the Senate elections in 2022 are going to be unpleasant. In 2022, the Republicans will have 20 seats up, and the Democrats only 14. Now, those seats for the Republicans, they'll have to hold on to Wisconsin, and they'll have to hold on to Pennsylvania, and they'll have to hold on to North Carolina. The Republicans are retiring in Pennsylvania, North Carolina. But the Democrats are going to have to hold on to Georgia now. And the Republicans in Georgia could get their head in the game. There are still more Republicans than Democrats in Georgia. They could pick up that seat. They really could. The Republicans did great in New Hampshire in 2020. I mean, the Republicans swept New Hampshire. They could pick up the New Hampshire Senate seat. They really could. Republicans can pick back up the Arizona Senate seat if they play their hands right. And they got a real shot in Nevada and Colorado. They could. The Republicans have real opportunities in 2022 if they don't sabotage themselves. The problem is, and there is some real concern among Republicans out there, that you're going to be fighting for the next 2 years over not really the Trump wing versus the non-Trump wing. You're going to be fighting over the conspiracists and the non-conspiracists, the QAnon wing of the party. And that there will be those who jump in and sabotage the GOP. There is a real concern about sabotage. You're also going to have Iowa up if Chuck Grassley doesn't run again. He is a senior citizen. He is in his 80s. Will he run again or not? The GOP, if it gets its head in the game, it can win. The Republicans could hold Pennsylvania and North Carolina in 2022 because you'll have a Democrat in the White House. They could pick back up Arizona and get themselves back control of the Senate. The map is not as desperate for the GOP as it seems. They could win New Hampshire. They're not going to win California, Oregon, or Washington. They're probably, if we're honest about it, they're not going to win Colorado or Illinois or New York or Vermont. They're not going to win Maryland. But the GOP has real opportunities. It's got real fundraising opportunities. It's got real recruitment opportunities. And I just think the Democrats are going to overplay their hand. Consider Joe Biden's stated agenda. Coming into office, Joe Biden now wants to get rid of the Keystone XL pipeline. That's going to cost American jobs. He wants to increase abortion on demand. That's going to hurt him with culturally conservative voters in the Black and Hispanic community. He wants to boost the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which sounds good on paper, but is actually going to cost a lot of people jobs. There are real problems for Joe Biden and his incoming agenda. I want to spend some time on his agenda and talk about it. I'm going to go on out. I'm going to take a commercial time out now. I'll take your phone calls when we come back. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. But what of Joe Biden's upcoming agenda? There are some problems for him, and there are some Democratic opposition groups forming against his own agenda.
There's not my truth or your truth.
So I think I need to say, maybe I don't need, maybe I should keep my mouth shut on this. So earlier in the program, I asked if you guys would try out the new texting number. You can text data to 877-973-7425. That's the same number as the call-in number. You can call the show by calling 877-973-7425, and you can now use the keywords and text to that number as well, because they're getting rid of the short codes that you text with by and large, unless you get a dedicated one, and those are expensive. More than 100 of you have done it, which tells me about our listeners engaged with that. It gives me a good idea of our listeners. But the number of you who are listening in the Atlanta area when I'm not on the radio live right now, y'all are going to get me in trouble. I appreciate you listening to the live stream. My goodness gracious. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Biden agenda. So, the Biden team has announced they're going to go for broke on immigration. They want to do a big amnesty program. They want to reinstate the Dreamers program, get rid of some of President Trump's executive orders on that. They want to give an 8-year amnesty with citizenship after 8 years. They want to expand immigration again into the country, lax border controls, the things like that. And the Republicans, of course, are beside themselves. Tom Cotton has come out and denounced it. But here's the thing. Biden's got to get this through a United States Senate where the filibuster still exists. Unless they do this massive reconciliation plan, and one of their arguments for doing this is it'll boost the number of taxpayers. Essentially, the Biden team wants to use reconciliation to get as much of their agenda done as they can through a big reconciliation package. Now, I need to explain what reconciliation is. Reconciliation is a rule in the United States Senate. It allows, once per year, a legislative package to sail through unimpeded by the filibuster. What happens is you put a bunch of stuff in a package, and you use the reconciliation procedure, which requires a certification that it will benefit the financial picture of the federal government, that it will boost revenue, it will decrease the national debt, it will decrease the deficit, and you can use that in reconciliation. The Republicans got their tax cuts through in reconciliation a couple of years ago because the Democrats all refused to vote for it. They couldn't overcome a filibuster. So they used reconciliation, and essentially what the Republicans did is they structured the tax cuts to phase out over time, but also they used cutting the corporate taxes would repatriate so much money abroad that it benefited the national, even cutting taxes benefited the national debt by increasing the amount of money corporations would bring back into the country. So they were able to get it through reconciliation. But you can only use it once a year. So if Joe Biden wants to use reconciliation for a lot of this stuff, they could technically argue that by boosting the number of people in this country who pay taxes and you can track them legally, that benefits it. You could add the gun tax, the $200 tax, that boosts it. You could do a bunch of things very creatively under reconciliation, but only so far. You can't just pack every single thing you want in it. There are things that he wants to do that he will have to do by executive order. So, for example, one of the things Joe Biden wants to do is he wants to get rid of a lot of the Trump anti-abortion executive orders. So the Trump administration barred Planned Parenthood from getting federal money because Planned Parenthood was offsetting its abortion money with non-abortion money, and the federal government said money's fungible. You can't do that anymore. A federal judge upheld it. The Biden administration is going to roll back the pro-life measures of the Trump administration that were done by executive order. The Biden administration, through executive order, is going to kill the Keystone XL pipeline. The pipeline has largely been buried, and it is mostly good to go, except for part of Nebraska, where there's been litigation. Well, now the Biden administration says they're going to kill it. That's going to kill jobs. He's already got some builders and construction unions mad at him over it. He wants to push through tax increases, which they can put in a reconciliation package. Essentially, he doesn't now, it seems, want to get rid of the tax cuts for corporations. As much as the Democrats campaigned against them, they understand that it would be economically bad in the current environment to raise the corporate tax rate again when we're now at a competitive corporate tax rate. But he does want to boost the individual tax rate. One thing they want to do is they want to get rid of, they want to bring back SALT, the state and local tax deduction, to help rich people who live in blue states, which actually isn't a bad idea. I'm hearing some people say that Republicans could actually compromise on this issue. Let me explain this one to you. So if you make $400,000 a year and you live in New York City, you are actually not very rich because the cost of living in New York City is extraordinarily high. You arguably can't even live inside New York City if you make $400,000 a year. You can't live in Manhattan. You got to go to an outer borough. So some Republicans are proposing this. Bring back the SALT deduction where you can take your state and local taxes and deduct it from your federal income tax as long as you make $400,000 or less. But if you make over $400,000, every dollar over that, you're not allowed to take that deduction. And some Republicans are saying this will help the GOP. Why? Because there are a lot of millionaires and billionaires who have fled states like New York and California for Florida and Texas over the SALT deduction. So if you allow people to take it up to $400,000, that would offset it enough for the people who cross that threshold that they may not actually move. And there are some Republicans who are concerned that Republican areas of the country are going to become increasingly Democrat as some of these lefties move to these states for better taxes and keep voting Democrat. So they're okay with some of that. The other part of the Biden agenda that they're going to focus on is the virus and the vaccine. They want to boost. They want to boost the vaccine, and the Biden administration is letting it be known that there's going to be a national mask mandate. Now, the mask mandate is of limited impact. The only power that Joe Biden has as the head of the executive branch is to order you to wear a mask in federal buildings controlled by the executive branch. So if you go into any federal office building in the country that is controlled by the executive branch, the president is going to make you wear a mask. He can also impose it for airplanes and trains, but airplanes already are. I'm actually going over to Louisiana Friday night to my mother's birthday, and I'm going to have to wear a mask on Delta. Delta's already mandating it, so Biden won't be doing anything different than is already being done there, but he's going to make it official. Then they want to ramp up vaccine production, and they want to ramp up vaccine coverage. We'll see if they can actually do that. They claim that the Trump administration wrecked it, which isn't really true. Of course, the media will give them credit for even the slightest improvement. But a lot of what Biden wants to do hinges on reconciliation, and even then he can't do it all, and the filibuster is going to stay.
30.
Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, has said he's not getting rid of the filibuster, that he is totally open to Puerto Rico becoming a state, but he's not going to get rid of the filibuster to let them do it. So you're going to have to clear 60 votes in the Senate to get Puerto Rico statehood.
15.
And I don't think they can get 10 Republicans to go along with them on statehood for Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
A lot of things aren't actually going to change like the Democrats think. It is Erick Erickson here across the state of Georgia. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I need to, I want to lump a couple of things here together, but first and foremost, we need to talk about the vaccine. The website, if you go to DPH, D is in doctor, P is in philosopher, H is in hour, dph.georgia.gov. And you scroll down a little bit, you will see links to Ingles, Kroger, and Publix, where you can RSVP, you can reserve a slot for your vaccine. Now, Publix is pretty much completely booked up. Kroger is booked up as well. But Ingles is such a great grocery store. They compete where a lot of the major grocery store chains don't. And there's availability with Ingles. Ingles probably has the best website to sign up to get the virus. Now, if you do need to know that the pool of people who can get the virus is actually limited right now by category. In Georgia, the only people who can get the vaccine are people 65 and older and caregivers for those people, healthcare personnel, first responders, and long-term care facility residents and staff. But if you're in those groups of people, you can get the vaccine, and the easiest way to do it is to go to that website, DPH, Department of Public Health, dph.georgia.gov. Scroll down, and you will find links to Kroger, Ingles, and Publix, where you can reserve a slot to get your vaccine. Or there is another box that says areas in your county that give the shot, and a lot of them are local departments of public health. Now, if you're in Middle Georgia, Navicent Health, I hate that name. They used to be, so this group used to be called the Medical Center of Central Georgia, MCCG. Everybody knew what they were, MCCG, and they got a new CEO a number of years ago, and they decided to do some rebranding, and they came up with just another one of those made-up words, Navicent Health. For some reason, the CEO is now ousted, and about the only thing I think accomplished during the tenure was changing the name of the hospital that everybody knew to something no one knew, and half the people don't know how to say. Just ridiculous corporate-y stuff, and now they've been bought out by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County Board of Health's outside guy. The whole thing aggravates me. I'm sorry. You can tell I've lived in Middle Georgia for too long that something like this aggravates me. But nonetheless, Navicent, the Medical Center of Central Georgia, their real name, they're going to start offering reservations for people who meet the criteria to get the vaccine. Now, part of that criteria for 65 and older is if it is available. The governor was talking about this the other day, and he is deeply frustrated with the media in the state of Georgia. To the extent that there are parts of the state that have the vaccine available, they want to be able to give it to you. But there are some parts of the state, because demand was so high from from nursing homes, long-term care facilities, hospitals, first responders, they have it. But interestingly enough, there is a growing trend in not just Georgia, but in New York and other states where healthcare providers don't want the vaccine. Some of them just don't want it. Some of them don't think they need it. Some of them would rather other people get it. Some of them don't buy into it. Some of them are skeptical of it. I've been in the position where let's just all be honest here. You've never seen a vaccine roll out that quick, and you're thinking, what are the long-term side effects of it? Well, the more I learned about the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, the better I feel about them, and I'm ready to get it. I've got a pre-existing condition that qualifies me for the next group to come out, a lung issue. My wife does as well. The moment we can get the vaccine, we're both going to sign up and get it. And then we'll get scheduled for the second dose, and I'm ready to go. I am so ready to get the vaccine. I am ready to be done. I'm ready to get back to life. I'm ready to go hang out with listeners and grab a beer. I'm ready to go see parts of the state where I've got new stations coming on and see the program directors and the stations and the people. I'm ready to go. I'm ready for the vaccine. There's still a lot of skepticism by some people out there, and I will take your skepticism and take your place in line. But there's still a backlog. This is one of the areas where the Biden administration wants to expand the allotment. The Trump administration has been somewhat reserved in how they're doing it. The Biden administration now essentially wants to say, come one, come all. We'll see a pretty dramatic change tomorrow at noon when the vice president is sworn in, or former vice president. He will be the president-elect, and Donald Trump goes away. The president, Donald Trump, plans to leave the White House tomorrow morning. He is holding a ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base, or Joint Base Andrews, I guess they call it now, and will leave on Air Force One and go to Florida. He will be on the ground in Florida before Joe Biden is sworn in. You know, it's kind of funny. If he's flying to Florida and he's on Air Force One and noon hits, it's no longer Air Force One. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's no longer Air Force One at noon if President Trump is on the plane. It's just it's got a different it's I forget the exact tail number, but it becomes the tail number, not Air Force One. The plane that the president flies on is automatically designated Air Force One. So if Trump is going to be in Florida, does not want the indignity of flying on a government 747 that's not Air Force One, he'll be in Florida before Biden is sworn in. Mike Pence will be at the inauguration. And this gets me to something else that needs to be said. Donald Trump is leaving tomorrow. He will be no longer president of the United States. Lynn Wood, the conspiracy theorist, continues to circulate rumors and innuendo that Donald Trump is going to remain president, and that the person you see sworn in tomorrow, it's either Donald Trump in disguise as Joe Biden, or it's Joe Biden and it's irrelevant and a military coup is afoot. And I need you to understand this conspiracy theorizing from QAnon. There's a pastor in Tennessee. He's had some issues in the past. This guy, Greg Locke, this is his tweet. To be clear, I've changed my mind about nothing. Trump will remain president. Biden will be exposed. America will remain free. Revival is coming. He says he's unashamed of the gospel of Jesus, and he refuses to bow down to politically correct idols of our culture. This Pastor Greg Locke does, when he himself is the one who is clearly idol worshiping if he believes that Donald Trump will remain president after noon tomorrow. There are people who believe this conspiracy theory. I don't know that you can actually call yourself a Christian if you're that engaged so publicly in idol worship. Because if you're a person of faith, particularly if you're a Christian, you're bound by truth. And the idea that Donald Trump can remain president after noon tomorrow isn't true. It's not truth. And if you're committed to truth, you can't believe that, and yet some people are, and a lot of it is idol worship. But it goes beyond that as well. Lynn Wood and QAnon and others are pushing the idea that the president is collaborating with the military. And there is essentially going to be a military overthrow of the Biden administration. How can you call yourself an American patriot if you believe that Donald Trump is collaborating with the American military to overthrow the president of the United States, Joe Biden? You claim, well, it was an unlawful, stolen election. There's actually no proof. And the Trump administration had ample opportunity in court to make that claim, and they chose not to claim fraud in court. You've got to construct, frame, form an elaborate conspiracy theory. Here is the conspiracy theory. There are two. There are two conspiracy theories. There is a conspiracy theory that tomorrow, when you see Joe Biden being sworn in, it's actually Donald Trump in disguise. That's the fringe theory. Here's the prevailing theory. The prevailing theory is that the banks are about to be shut down and the power is about to be turned off, and there will be a military coup that keeps Donald Trump in power because the election was stolen by China and others, and the military is having to take action to protect the republic. And so you see what that framing does is it allows these people to claim somehow that they're still patriots upholding the country and the integrity of the country because the military is righting a wrong. It makes the military the good guys and Donald Trump the good guy, and everyone else who doesn't stand with them is the bad guy. You have this faction on the left right now of progressives who think that anyone who dared vote for Donald Trump has to apologize publicly before resuming society. In fact, you've got this growing sentiment of progressives that no one who worked for Donald Trump can be on any newscast. No one who worked for Donald Trump is allowed in polite society. No one who worked for Donald Trump can get a job anywhere. Any media outlet that hires anyone from the Trump administration must be shamed. They're no better, the people who push this on the left, than the people on the right who are pushing the idea that the military is going to keep Donald Trump in power. Both of them view themselves as patriots when in fact they're not patriots. They're actually, whether you want to call it traitors, secession, insurrectionists, or what, against the American order. It is within the bounds of the American order that you get to vote for who you want to vote for, and you're not punished for voting for that person. Democrats will always claim that Republicans are worse than anyone. We're already seeing, for example, with Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, Democrat attacks saying, he's even more dangerous than Trump because he's actually, he's got the smarts to be able to do what Trump couldn't do. So Josh Hawley is now worse than Donald Trump because he's a smart Donald Trump. You see how they move the goalposts on this. And so Josh Hawley is bad. Republicans are bad. People who give to them are bad. They're actually now an organized effort to look through donations to politicians and conservative groups and shame any corporations, any major donors who gave them money. They are now as unwelcome in society as these Trump voters because they funded whatever happened. See, they're taking what happened at the Capitol on the 6th, and they're extrapolating out that anyone, no matter how tangentially related to Donald Trump, is culpable for what happened last week. That's not how it works, but that's how they want to make it work. And the media is going to overplay their hand helping the Democrats. There will be a backlash to that. It's like neither side ever understands how they overplay their hand. None of them understand that they cause backlash by overplaying their hand constantly. And there will be backlash to anyone who tries to punish, generally, people who supported Donald Trump. And there should be. There should be a stunning rebuke, frankly, from the president-elect over anyone who thinks that anyone who voted for Donald Trump should be punished. But I'm not holding my breath for that. I'm not holding my breath for the media to see the error of their ways. In fact, you've got members of the media now, a lot of them from CNN, wanting to get Fox News shut down and taken off the air. And OAN and Newsmax. Listen, I think Dominion Voter Systems deserves to bankrupt OAN out of existence. But to see members of the media now say, they were complicit in the rise of Trump, they must be taken off the radio or taken off TV or taken out of newspapers or taken out of magazines or shut up in general, taken off the internet. It's a very dangerous path for anyone in the media to go down. They will overplay their hands on this. And there will be a backlash, and it'll probably come at the polls in 2022. I'm not one of these people who thinks you can prognosticate out 2 years or even 4 years, and when I do, I tend to get it wrong. But I see that others tend to get it wrong as well. The amount of people who looked at Georgia and said, the Republicans are going to keep the Senate. Well, guess what? They're not now, because Republicans snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Both political parties are actually really good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And I suspect what you're going to see over the next 2 years is so much belittlement of people who voted for Donald Trump, so much belittlement of anyone who dares go against democratic orthodoxy, that voters will respond in 2022, and it won't be good for the Democrats. It won't be good for them. And They're never going to be able to acknowledge it. They're never going to want to acknowledge it. But it's going to come and it's going to show up at the polls. The only people I think who can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory for the Republicans are the Republicans themselves in 2022, and they're going to try to do it. The QAnon factions, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the like, are going to try to sabotage the GOP. But I don't know that they can sabotage the GOP so much in 2022 as the Democrats can spark a revolt at the ballot box against them by trying to punish anyone who ever dared vote for Donald Trump. That's not going to fly with voters.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
I've actually been working on recipes. If you want to sign up for the recipe list, text the word recipe. Right now you can text recipe to 33777, but you text the word recipe to 877-973-7425. So this weekend, Philip and my buddy Elliot from church, they were my researchers, my volunteers for my experiment. I made fried shrimp tacos on Sunday night, and they were actually good. I gotta say, they were good. So there's this restaurant. You know, this is one of the sad parts of the pandemic. The amount of local restaurants that have gone out of business. There's a restaurant by my office in Atlanta. It's called Tavern Point, and it is shuttered because of the pandemic. Now, a lot of the food there was kind of overpriced and a little bit too frou-frou for me. I'm not, I like to cook, I like to eat, but I'm not a foodie per se, and that I don't like all the frou-frou nonsense you get in a lot of restaurants these days. Just give me something that's well cooked, but I don't need it to fancy. I'd like to be able to pronounce the ingredients. But one thing that this restaurant made that I thought was really good were fried shrimp tacos. And I just decided I got to figure out how to make fried shrimp tacos, like good fried shrimp. Yeah, I mean, I can make fried shrimp and I can make tacos and put them together, but it's not the same. And I figured they were good. I got to give myself credit here. They were good. And so I'm going to have to send that recipe out. And I've mastered smoking wings as well. They were good. The problem is I made 24 wings, and there were 3 of us, and I think combined we maybe had a dozen, so I threw about a dozen wings away along with the rest of the shrimp. But no, see, here's my problem. Nobody in my house will eat a lot of the stuff that I cook, and it becomes a problem. Like making gumbo. I need to make gumbo. I'm going to have to invite some friends over, but I can't invite friends over until we've had the vaccine, and I can't get the vaccine until they open the pool of people. And rumor has it they may open the pool for the vaccine this week or next week, so that people who have pre-existing conditions can get it. I hope they expand the pool because I'm ready to get it. But I'm still working. I got to work on a chicken sandwich. You know, everybody's doing a chicken sandwich. McDonald's is coming out with a chicken sandwich. The Wall Street Journal today has this story. McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Popeyes, and other chains bite into the fervor for chicken sandwiches. The new menu items offer a potential lift for fast food restaurants and suppliers facing COVID-19 disruptions. McDonald's is now signaling that it will have a crispy fried chicken sandwich back on restaurant menus nationwide. For a while there, it did. And in select parts of the country, McDonald's still has a fried chicken sandwich on the menu, but it's not what people want. People want the Popeyes version where you hear it crunch when you bite into it. I don't think I've ever actually had the Popeyes fried chicken sandwich. I still like the Wendy's one the best, the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's. I don't like the Chick-fil-A fried chicken sandwich, or the spicy chicken sandwich. You'll have to forget. Look, I like Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. But the spicy chicken sandwich is just overdone to me. And I don't know, I love Chick-fil-A, but the basic chicken sandwich, it's too greasy for me. I mean, I like the fried chicken nuggets from Chick-fil-A, but I actually like the grilled stuff from Chick-fil-A better than the fried stuff. Well, Shake Shack now has its fried chicken sandwich. It's been testing it in South Korea and is supposed to come into the United States. McDonald's is telling McDonald's franchisees that they will have a full-on spicy chicken sandwich, crispy chicken sandwich later this year. McDonald's in 2013 launched chicken wraps, while Jack in the Box, Dunkin' Donuts, and Wendy's have all been promoting sandwiches. Wendy's has a spicy chicken sandwich. McDonald's introduced one in 2014, but then it started to fade. It hasn't had a Southern-style battered chicken sandwich on U.S. menus for years, and franchisees want one back. So it's coming back. What's old is new again. McDonald's says it's going to be selling a crispy chicken sandwich next month with crinkle-cut pickles on a buttered potato bun, while adding 2 other chicken sandwiches to its permanent menu. The chicken sandwich wars are coming back, and McDonald's intends to win them, and I'm not going to hold my breath that they actually succeed. I don't believe it. Look, I like McDonald's fries. I like McDonald's, but I've got my doubts about the company. It's actually a real estate company that's confused and thinks it's a fast food restaurant. When they get that figured out, maybe they'll do better. But every once in a while, you just need to go to McDonald's and get fries. They do that very well, better than Chick-fil-A, actually.